When aspects of a complex case exceed your personal expertise, you bring in a co-counsel to add the specific insight your firm needs for next-level results. Marketing in the legal industry requires complex strategy and insight far beyond anything you learned in law school. Want more for your law firm? Time to bring in a marketing co-counsel. Welcome to CounselCast. I'm your host, Karin Conroy, your marketing co-counsel. In every episode, I discuss marketing topics with experts who answer your questions and help your firm achieve more. Here's today's guest.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. My name is Jake Minick. I work in North Carolina. I'm a DWI attorney, the NC DWI guy. So we have a practice here in North Carolina. I think we're at 15 offices currently. We have 9 attorneys and then 5 full-time staff. So we focus on DWI cases. We have a mission of helping people. Our big, hairy, audacious goal for the 10-year plan is to help 10,000 people. Provide wow service to 10,000 people. So very excited to be on. I love talking marketing, love talking anything about branding, marketing, business. So growing your business. So very excited to be on the podcast.
Thank you so much for being here, Jake. I know we had another great conversation about marketing and legal marketing specifically on your podcast. That was the one thing you didn't mention, is you also have a podcast where you talk about all of this, and we could have a whole separate conversation that I think is fascinating in your podcast about how you've really honed in on owning that brand of being the DWI lawyer and focusing in on tips and all of that stuff, but then bringing in people to kind of expand that. But we're not going to talk about that piece of it today.
I'll just put in one little plug on that front. So it's the NCDWI Guy podcast, and episode 69 was the episode that we got to talk about web branding strategies. So if anybody wants to take a listen.
It was so good because we were talking
about fun.
Storytelling and how you can really go wrong with imagery and kind of telling your client stories and stuff. And there was some really good stuff in there. So today, though, at the end of that conversation, you and I talked a lot about marketing after we stopped recording. And so we were talking about, all these cool things you're doing with the podcast. And then we got on the topic of local marketing. So that is what we're going to talk about today. And here's our big question is, how do I set up my legal practice on Google local search? So you, in the time that between when we recorded and today, you went out and did all of this stuff. And so you've got all the pointers, all the process, and you did all of this. So how did you do that?
Yeah, I owe a ton to that conversation. So again, I always say on the podcast, I learn more than I kind of am putting in, I'm getting more out of it. And it really made a huge difference on our business, that one conversation. So you were, I think, the third person to tell me that I needed to get on Google Local, that this was the kind of future of how Google was going to kind of get people in contact with local businesses. This was the kind of next generation of Google My Business, so to speak. So I had somebody kind of share Google Local with me last summer. So summer of 2020, I started down the road of getting into kind of the Google Local mix in November, and then basically kind of had that fall flat on its face. I started down this process of updating my information, putting it on Google Local. The process just kind of came to a standstill, and I just left it alone for about, I think it was probably right at 6 or 7 months until we had our conversation several months back.
That's actually not typical. I would say more people kind of start it and then leave it for years and years. So I think that's, for people who are listening to this, that's going to sound very familiar, where it's like, okay, I've signed up and now I don't know what to do. So that's totally normal.
There was basically a verification process. There was a background search that is required as part of getting up on Google Local. So I think it depends on what kind of professional services that you're in, the extensiveness of the background check. But for lawyers, there is a background check required. And the company that was doing the background searches for Google back in November is actually different than the one that's doing it now. It was a
Oh
company
my
called
gosh.
Pinkerton back in November. And so for whatever reason, my kind of profile got lost in the background check. And I don't know if that was just like one of the early stages or just kind of them trying to figure out, that there maybe have been a friction point, but basically I had done all of the information fill out on Google, sent in everything to them, but then they had to send it into a third party background check, this company called Pinkerton, and that's where it got lost. And I just I followed up once or twice, I think at the end of November and then into December, and then just time takes over and you start moving in a different direction. But again, our conversation, you again, I think we're like the third person, but you really emphasize like, you got to do this. Like, this can't wait any longer. And so I think within a couple of days after we spoke, I kind of went back down that path. I contacted Google, got in touch with a great service rep there. He basically kind of directed me on what do we need to do to kind of take this to the next stage of things with Pinkerton. So he put in a request form, and then I started filling out for our other locations. And I think, again, it's either 14 or 15 other locations that we filled out all of the information for. It was time consuming. It did take a while to put in all of that information, but it was pretty streamlined once you kind of get one down. So if you want to know a good time frame, do a couple of quick searches. How do I get my legal business on Google Local? Follow the instructions, and then within 3 or 4 hours, you're going to be at the stage that you've submitted everything to get the background check done. You have to have your driver's license. You have to have, I think, your bar card so that they can have you certified. But as soon as you get all of that information, and within about 3 or 4 hours of time, you're going to then have probably about a maybe 4 or 5 day waiting period as of right now to get all of those listings live.
Okay, so a couple things I want to go back. The first thing is I've had clients who you're not the first person I've tried to encourage this. It really shows impact, and we'll get into that in a minute. But they get to this background check part, and they're saying, I don't want to give Google. I had one client say that they asked for their social security number. Did they ask that detail, or?
I think that they did. I believe that they did ask for the social number, and that wasn't necessarily Google. It was, I believe, the third party background check party.
Okay. So that made them very nervous, and they did not want to do that. And I thought in my head, I didn't say this to them, but I was like, well, Google probably has this information on you anyway.
Yeah, they probably do. I mean, there's no secrets out there.
No. So were there any points where you felt kind of weird and like that was uncomfortable, or did it feel safe and secure and you kind of just went through all of those details?
There wasn't really any kind of sticking points. Again, the guy that I spoke with at Google Local. So I think I think they've got a good amount of support going into Google Local so that people will kind of adopt this new platform that they're going to probably try at some point in the future to monetize and push. So they want people to get into it. So they're trying to kind of, take down all the walls and barriers to getting into this. But the background check portion of it, and I don't remember the name, honestly, I just have such a bad feeling with Pinkerton in my head in terms of the first experience.
Is it when you went through Google Verified? Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they use a third party company.
Yeah. Something else at this point. And, that their form was actually a lot easier to fill out than the Pinkerton form. And I'm assuming, again, that they're probably kind of getting feedback of, why are we not getting more people verified on this? And it's well, there's too much information getting asked for in the background check. So it was a very easy form to fill out on all of the ones that I did recently. Again, other than the one back in November, it was a much more streamlined process of getting that information submitted.
And then the other thing I wanted to emphasize was that I've had so many good experiences with Google support lately, just across the board. I use their products, their Google My Business and all of the Google Suite and all of that. And so the other pointer and tip that I would add, and just to reiterate what you were saying, is that you had a great support guy who helped you walk through all of these steps. So that's a good thing to just kind of keep in mind is reach out for Google support and, find those guys who are going to walk you through this because there are a number of steps. But I think the reason it's so successful, or part of the reason it's so successful, is because there's so many hoops that you have to jump through and not everyone's doing it. So when you show that extra, it's like a lot of things in life. You show that extra effort and you kind of jump through those hoops, then Google kind of gives you a little reward at the end of that.
They do. And I think so I just looked this up. I think that the new background check company is called Evident. So I believe
Oh,
that
okay.
that was the background check company, but I'll give his first name. I mean, they probably have a bunch of different people, but I can remember it because he was so nice. Nigel was the name of this guy that I talked to on the phone several times. And he was just, so helpful. Like he didn't have any type of like, clock that he was on in terms of getting off the phone. He followed up with me multiple times afterwards because he was like, I just want to call back in to make sure that all of this stuff is verified. 2 weeks after my last contact with him, he basically sent me another email that said, hey, your last location isn't live yet because you
Oh,
need a Google
wow.
review to be able to get it live. So
That's
basically, he
amazing.
had gone through all of them and double checked and made sure that everything was good to go. So again, yeah, they, I think, are making it very easy by providing people that really want to help to get these listings up.
Okay, so that's so good to know. And it's good that there's like that layer of support that people can count on as they're going through this. So you go through the process, and I want to ask more about how it was to do multiple locations because I know that can be tricky for people who have multiple offices. Not everybody has that, but when that comes up, it seems like that would be confusing.
Yeah, it's, for me, and I think it's different depending on how many locations that you have and what kind of business that you're in. So I believe for certain businesses or for businesses with a certain number of locations, you can actually upload everything through like an Excel spreadsheet.
Oh,
So I
nice.
believe that there is kind of an option of, again, I don't know what the cutoff points are for that. But for me, it was just basically duplicating the process 14 times. So again, the first one was a little bit more onerous in terms of just getting used to it. After that, it was kind of like getting it down to a system of, taking the pictures each time because it wasn't as though like the driver's license or the bar card, you actually had to have your phone out and it sent you a link from,
Oh,
the
wow.
computer to the phone to take a picture kind of in real time of your driver's license. So I guess assuming that they don't want people that are like, downloading somebody else's picture or whatever it might
Yeah.
be. So it was time consuming, but it wasn't terrible after really that first listing and kind of figuring out the way through it. I believe there was, kind of six drop down menus, if I'm remembering it correctly. One was about basically the location, what kind of business that you're in. One was for the background check. One was for the being verified by Google with the driver's license and that type of information. So again, it was very kind of cut and dry in terms of the information. There wasn't if you've done a Google My Business listing, that to me is way more work than the
Yeah.
Google local
Oh, good.
services, way more information, much more kind of like tell us about your firm and,
Yeah.
give us all of these specific details about how long your business has been in existence and office space and all these kind of things. For the local services, it was very kind of black and white, the information that they were asking. So again, you didn't have to bring your creative brain
Yeah.
to getting verified, which is nice. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes it's just nice to get it knocked out, even if it's, a lot of paperwork to fill out.
Yeah, we all
So,
have those days where it's like, I just want to do a bunch of administrative stuff. My brain is at 50% today. This is what we're going to do.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you jump through all the hoops, you get verified. You said the background took 4 or 5 days, and you finally get the whole process where you're verified. So then you have access to do these local service ads. Is that right? How did you
Exactly.
set that up?
Yeah, so basically, it's very similar to the kind of advertising platform that is used for Google My Business. So if you're doing like the local pack ads, so you're doing one of the ads within the local pack, it's very similar in terms of, kind of Google AdWords, Google Local Pack ads. So you have kind of a platform where you go in and kind of say, I want to have this, listed within this specific set of service areas, locational areas. Here's my, my budget. But if you've done any type of Google advertisements, it was very similar to that and very easy to set up. So I want to say that we put most of the offices at around $250 in ad spend per month to just kind of see what that looked like. And we still haven't adjusted that, honestly, too much. We're still kind of trying to like get information. I think the ads have been live now for about 70 or so days, but we've gotten tremendous feedback from it so far. So it's definitely been worth in every single office location, the amount of ad spend that we put into it.
So tell us about your results. You said you've got this great feedback. You're so far spending a few $100s per location. So for a lot of firms, that's, a pretty reasonable ad spend. And what kind of traffic and how specific is it? And then also, I know that's a lot of questions leading up, but I know that the ads are set up in a different way where you can verify that that was a legitimate lead. And how does that work?
Yes. So I was just looking back. It looks like most of our background checks came back around July 22nd, 23rd. So I think the ads, probably were going live by the end of July. So about 2.5 months or right at about 2 months actually of time that these ads have been live. So really closer to probably like 60 days. And I would say that we probably had around 100 leads that have come in through these different offices. So some offices are in larger markets than others, and some of the ads I think are doing slightly better than others. But I've got a couple of things that are helpful in terms of knowing the power of the ads. So first of all, we have several locations where we have less of a track record, basically newer offices that don't have all of the reviews and all of the kind of, our attorneys in those markets haven't been there, as long as a couple of them for basically right at or less than a year. And we immediately started getting in leads in those locations. So it was really helpful in terms of being able to get into the consumer's kind of vision on first page of Google immediately. In some of those smaller markets, in the larger markets, it's basically been one more piece of real estate on page one than we already have with the Google My Business, with organic listings, with other ads that we're doing through Google. So you just start to see that same ugly face of mine in multiple places, and you can't get away from it. I mean, it's just how much real estate can you eat up on Google page one. So it's been really amazing. I have not been impressed, in all honesty, with Google ads in the past. That's not been something that I have been very much a supporter of. Even with the Google My Business ads that we've done, to me, the only value of that is in markets where you see us twice versus see us once. Like, I mean, it basically is like an additional place, but I think, we're getting those people to call us through reviews, to call us because of the competition and that type of thing. So, it's not been something in the past that I would say Google ad spend was one of my things that we were pushing at the firm. That I would say is a little bit different when it comes to the local service ads. And maybe down the road, as more people enter into this market, you definitely should, as more people enter in, it's going to get more expensive. So it's one of those things that maybe this is more of a short-lived kind of, next stage of Google advertising. But as of today, right now, it has tremendous value in terms of advertisement. I mean, cost per lead, we were spending, I want to say, close to $15 per lead on a lot of our Google ad spend prior to the Google local service ads that we were doing. And now it's probably down more in like the $5 range. So it's been much better leads. So like you just said, the leads that you get coming in, they basically have to indicate why they are calling you. So as soon as the lead calls, hopefully they speak with somebody on the phone, but then you also immediately get a notification in your email that says this caller called in that's interested in your service. You can then go into your local service ads back end of things, you basically can look at your dashboard and kind of track, the numbers that are coming in, the names. It's very easy to identify this was a person that was a lead, or this is a garbage call, but way better quality calls in terms of the calls that are coming in through the local service
So
ads.
when you identify that it's a garbage call, you get a credit, right?
I believe that you do. Again, I almost don't really have a good sense of that because there really
It's
has
been
been
so
so
new.
few garbage calls that have come in through
That's
it.
amazing.
We are very much kind of advertising in the DWI vein, so we have gotten most of our calls have been potential DWI clients.
Sure.
There have been some that, somebody has a question about license or DMV issue or something that's related, but not that I can recall any, just marketing company that's calling in and, trying to kind of, basically sell you something or something
Yeah.
along those lines. There's really not any type of sales calls coming in
Yeah,
through
we get a
this.
lot of clients who are not doing local service ads and they're doing either SEO or pay per click. And even just with those, like you said, the quality's not as great and they're getting really tangential calls and they'll be trying to call a government, department or something like
Right.
they're total garbage calls. And that's
Right.
it. They have no real way of tracking those. They have no way of knowing how many clicks they just paid for that garbage call and they have no way of getting a credit for that. So this is a much cleaner, more direct, but then also if you do happen to get a couple that aren't great, you're not going to pay for those. So that's even better.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those situations, and maybe some of these callers would have found us, especially in our larger markets, through other, kind of real estate again that we own on the first page of Google. But at the same time, if you said in 2 months you could get 100 leads, and all you got to do is go on and like set up your account. Again, it's ridiculous that it took 8 months to get that finalized from start to finish. But again, I think learn from my mistake. Don't spend any more time without your Google Local setup. And I also think even beyond just paying for ads, once you have a Google Local office set up, so once you've actually kind of done all the work, I think until they again have more competition, you still may actually have some ad slots that end up getting shown at this point because of the fact that they just don't have enough attorneys that are involved. So I think you
That's
can
even
kind of get
better.
some freebie.
Yeah, that's even better. That's awesome. Okay, so we're gonna go into the book and what you're reading. Any last tips or pointers about Google Local? I feel like we've really kind of nailed it and covered it, but anything else that you want to just kind of leave people with about Google service ads, going through that process that's, somewhat intimidating for people who are risk averse.
Yeah, I think anytime you're trying to figure out something new, in addition to handling your caseload and dealing with staffing issues and putting out fires and trying to get payroll put together and dealing with the trust account, whatever it is that's kind of like on your plate, trying to figure out something new feels really intimidating, and it's like that's going to get pushed onto the back burner. And I'll just say again, learn from my mistake. I should have, I'm glad that I listened to you. I'm really glad
Me
that
too.
whatever you said, was like the thing that pushed me over the edge. But it's kind of like I wish I had listened to the first person that told me to do the local service ads as opposed to like pushing it off and delaying it this long. It really is. Again, I think you never really know what the future of Google looks like. It's going to change multiple iterations over the next 5 years. But as of right now, today, the
It's the
Google
greatest
local
thing.
service ads, that's the next wave. So, if you want to get on the front end of the next wave, where there's cheaper advertising, less people doing it, less other faces that you're going to be competing with up there at the top of the page, now's the time to hit that train.
And
So
really
don't
high.
wait.
All right. So, Jake, tell me what you're reading. I'm an avid reader, so I read about 100 books a year. I like to talk to everybody about what they're reading so that we can kind of all compare and have sort of a virtual book club here on the podcast. Tell me what book you would recommend.
Yeah, I love reading. There's a great author that I read a lot of, Matthew Kelly. He's written a whole kind of list of different spiritual books and business books, but basically he says, best way to improve your life is to spend 10 minutes a day reading. And it sounds like a small
Absolutely.
amount, but he talks about how many pages that would add up to be over a lifetime. And I think it really is the best way to change your life. So I recently read a book, a non-business book. It is this book about John Fisher and Thomas More. And so this was written by a federal judge that I clerked with down in Charlotte when I was in law school. I did a kind of externship semester with him. So he's a great guy, but it was a really good read about kind of how these saints from the 15th century, especially for lawyers, apply in today's world. So it was a really cool read for, anybody that's an attorney. So it's called John Fisher and Thomas More, Keeping Their Souls While Losing Their Heads. So great read by Robert Conrad.
Robert Conrad. Okay, we will put a link to the book and have the picture of that. It's really fascinating to hear all of these different books from some of the guests that we've had so far. They've been kind of inspirational, sort of motivational. Some of them have been spiritual. Some of them have been business, straight out marketing books. This one sounds totally different, so I love that. That's cool. And it sounds right in line with kind of the interesting stuff that is already going on inside of other lawyers' heads. So that sounds fascinating. That's awesome. All right. Well, Jake, thank you so much for spending your time today and giving us these awesome tips. I know that they will absolutely convert into actual, verifiable, measurable results for people if they jump through those hoops and, do the things that Google asks them to do. I know anyone who's listening totally appreciates that. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, Karen, so much for having me on. It's been fun. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast a couple months ago. And most of all, I appreciate you telling me to go get my Google local service ad set up. So
awesome. Thanks again. Thank you for listening to this episode on the CounselCast podcast. I know that by implementing what you heard today, your law firm will achieve more. Be sure to visit the website at counsel-cast.com for the resources mentioned on this episode. If you enjoyed the episode, I would appreciate it if you could rate and review the podcast on Apple and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. See you on the next one.